Hello everyone from Engineers Without Borders. So I can't be with you for the weekend. I hear that there's 11 of you that have been brought together and you've been asked to take an idea that you have and over the course of the 12 months take that idea and implement it. I hear that you're also quite knowledgeable about the work of Engineers Without Borders and the theory of social change. So I've been asked to just briefly speak about some of our experiences, some challenges that we faced, and some of the things that we've learned along the way. So perhaps in telling you some of this, I'll just briefly tell you about our program, the Timeraiser. And how we arrived there was really a connecting the dots exercise that we had many friends who were artists. A lot of these artists were being asked to donate to charitable causes. But many of them are only earning a couple $1,000s a year. So there wasn't much that another tax receipt would do to benefit an emerging artist. And then we had a whole bunch of friends who all said that if they knew where to turn and if they knew that their time was going to be used well, that they would volunteer. And then we knew a lot of agencies that were hoping to connect with potential volunteers, people who could lend their skills to the organization's needs, but were really struggling to find a way to do it. So we just sort of sat back and then tried to connect the dots and say, hey, what if there was an interesting way that we could pay emerging artists, take that work, display it the night of our Timeraiser event, make the time raising a bit like speed dating for volunteerism, where you could have lots of different agency groups in a room. They would have their agency representatives there. And then our peer group could come in and again try to match our skills with an organization's needs and just go around the room and try to find a good match. So one of the things that that happened to us very early on is really trying to understand how complex civic engagement is. How the needs, the capacity needs of a small social service or a medium-sized environmental or a large arts and culture organization, how they were similar in some ways but quite different in others. We had to spend a lot of time understanding the landscape of the charitable sector here in Canada. Stats that we learned along the way that there's 88,000 charities, many of which that number has doubled in the last 20 years. That there's 1.8 million people who get paid in the sector, that there's 5 million Canadians who volunteer almost 2 billion volunteer hours and also donate up to $10 million. But in learning all of that, we really understood that this was all being done on the backs of a few people. It's a very small percentage of Canadians who are responsible for a bulk of all the engagement. So as we started to craft our program, we really had to try to think about, well, how do we make volunteerism and civic engagement, how do we really make it impactful, where we don't just host interesting events, where people talk about engagement, they do a lot of tire kicking, but perhaps don't make the purchase, if you will. So we really had to take a step back and understand what those threads were. How could we build some language and capacity around it? So essentially what I did is I went back to school. I took some continuing education programs around how to build an effective nonprofit, trying to learn as much as I could about capacity building. Some models of capacity building are good, others are really, really bad. But in doing so, really trying to understand the landscape, generating a mental model. So in doing so, it took us a lot longer than we thought because we wanted to do it right. We didn't want to, again, make this a tire-kicking event, something that looked flashy, something that may have generated a lot of interest but really didn't generate the impact that we were hoping for. So while we thought we could do this right away, while we thought we could get a Timeraiser off the ground in literally weeks, it took us 6 months of research. It took us 6 months of consultation, and it took us 6 months of adjusting our plan based on the consultation until we came up with our very first one. It was a long process. It's something where, again, if I look back at our initial work plan, we probably should have scaled everything back by about a quarter. That was our biggest learning. In this space of social impact, things take long. Understanding the political, economic, technological, and social threads around a complex issue, it's certainly not like launching a widget or launching a product in the private sector. That stuff can happen relatively fast. But when you're working in the social space around complex issues, whether it's poverty, healthcare, social services, international development, the environment, there's so much interplay. And for us, over the last 8 years, that's really what we've tried to do, is understand the mental model, understand around what a complex issue really means, what are the threads, and really avoiding some of the duplication of efforts or things that are uncoordinated. So for instance, you have a complex issue here where you have program A that's trying to do something in isolation, thinker B who's working on something that may or may not connect with the work of other people, and an organization C that could be doing a lot of advocacy work, etc., but not connecting with people on the grassroots. So in it, what we've really tried to do is embrace a more of a networked model, a model in which we really believe all of the work that we do is quite porous, that it's stuff that we generate, but we make it accessible to just about anyone in the world who wants it. And that we're really a constellation, that we're working in a constellation of networked organizations, like-minded people, like-minded organizations, finding the time, developing the discipline to make sure that our work really connects to one another. That again, that we're taking the long-term view about solving complex issues and even understanding that some of these problems can't be solved, they can just be minimized. And so how do we align resources, our time, our financial resources, any technological solutions that we build in order to, again, get some alignment between the key players. So if this is a funder, if this is a volunteer center, if this is a community foundation, if this is an organization doing similar work somewhere, again, how do we spend the time and develop the capacity in order to do it? And that's quite different than a lot of the logic models you see in capacity building work, where there's, you generate your inputs and you develop your activities and you generate your outcomes and then you have impact. Well, in that logic model, you would assume that you're sort of an organization unto yourself, that all of the work that you do is directly going to, again, affect the complex issue. But in the networked model, the way that you operate, the way that you share information looks quite a bit different, and therefore impacting the way that you could potentially develop a program or develop a product. I'll give you a very, very simple example. Along the way, when we started to ask agencies, how can we better help you through the work that we do, we started to get a lot of print material from these organizations. So posters and flyers promoting an event, annual general meeting, a variety of other programmatic stuff that they had through the course of the year. And then we started asking the question around, well, where do you do your printing? And in asking that question, we found a lot of organizations were using commercial print shops all across the GTA. And then we also heard of this great little social enterprise, Eva's Phoenix Print Shop, that tries to provide at-risk youth mentorship and training so they can learn the print trade. And by running a commercial social enterprise print shop, that they could earn revenue in order to support more of their programming. When we surveyed 50 charities in our network, all of them had heard of Eva's Phoenix, but not one actually had used them. So the learning that we took along the way, that a complex issue around engagement and solving problems, we never expected that we'd be now trying to rally 50 charities in order to use Eva's Phoenix Print Shop, but developing a type of networked model where we understand, again, these threads and the connectivity of what other organizations are doing. We've actually dedicated resources. We have one staff member who's spending a considerable amount of her time actually working to advocate on behalf of Eva's, get charities to sign up using Eva's Phoenix Print Shop as a service. And for us, that is not anything that we would have built into, again, our impact model years ago. But again, understanding the network and how that all works really changed our approach to it. So there were some unintended things that started in how we began the Timeraiser. Connecting the dots was the really important theme, making sure that we didn't have blinders on around how we could align our resources the best in order to participate in addressing a complex issue. And then, again, aligning our resources and getting buy-in from some of our board and funders around why this works. The Eva's Phoenix initiative is a little bit different than what we would have started on a traditional mission statement with the Timeraiser. However, it really now adds value to our work. So we feel like we're a more resilient organization than we've ever been before in this network model, understanding the complexity of how like-minded organizations can work together, asking the right questions. So in closing, probably the only advice that I have, and it's something that we live by all the time, social change doesn't happen in the vacuum. And it's not often when there's one particular technological solution, one programmatic development, or one organization that's going to be able to do it on its own. There's never enough resources. The world just changes so fast. So again, understanding these threads, how they all come together, is probably the most important advice I could give you. If you ever want to grab coffee or talk, feel free to drop me a line. We're located right at Yonge and College. Thanks for your time, good luck on your project, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.